Very punctual. I would expect nothing less from a mathematician.
Sometimes it pays to be punctual.
I think almost all the time.
Well, I never miss a tea time, so I consider this a tea time.
This is a tea time. That's right. You're here 5 minutes early. That's funny. I was sitting here 5 minutes early too, thinking, well, 5 minutes in Instagram live time is about 35 minutes in real time.
It's true. That is so true.
So thank you so much for being on. So for anybody that's new to Arccos, or I'm going to have this on my YouTube channel as well. So this will be in perpetuity. So I'm hoping this will be a resource for people to hear this conversation, as well as just a really interesting way of learning about how people can take data and simply, which is what Arccos has done, and give some very good insights into how someone can perform better and make better choices on the golf course. So, so Arccos is well, I think of it as a stats keeping device, but it's so much more than that. Do you have like a one phraser for what Arccos is?
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny. We're actually ourselves have a lot of those conversations because it does a whole lot of stuff. And the whole idea, I would say, the premise is what we're trying to do is help you play better, play smarter, have more fun through the power of technology and data. So I think the three things that we do really well are we automatically track your shots. So it's a shot tracker. So you have a catalog history of all the shots you've taken automatically. We give you in-play input like a Caddy would if you want it. So like a rangefinder. So we're taking weather and all those things into account. And also your tendencies of what clubs you hit well, which you don't, to make recommendations. So we have a rangefinder. And then the third piece is we have the most advanced analytics platform. So we give you insights about your game that you can then utilize, whether it's with your instructor, your fitter, or yourself, to play better, to practice smarter, to understand your weaknesses and strengths, and then overcome the weaknesses and play to your strengths. So that's how I would describe it.
I mean, I'm smiling because if you're in an elevator, you better have like 100 floors.
No, you know what I do is if I'm in an elevator, I just pull out my app and I show it, and then people, that's it. I'd say like it's the app that describes it better than any words that I could.
Yeah, that's right. So Arccos to me is what I feel like I discovered. You discovered it. You're the CEO and founder of the thing. But when I stumbled upon it, this was a few years ago. I was so thrilled because to me, I'm a coach and I want people to play better, obviously. And I also want to know what my students are doing on the golf course when I'm not with them, which is all the time. It can't be with everybody all the time. So Arccos solved for me the problem of understanding what someone's doing, whether it's for myself or my students. What are they actually doing out there? How far are they hitting the ball? Are they missing to the right? Are they missing to the left? What clubs are they taking the most often? What is the range of distances that each club is going? What's the shortest? What's the longest? And you basically alluded to a whole other amount of stuff that I want to go into a little more. But all that's being said, done very easily and simply. So I don't have to write anything down.
That's the key.
Yeah.
Because when you're out golfing, I'm an avid golfer. We have a whole bunch of avid golfers in the company. We certainly are a golf culture, and we know when we're out golfing, we're not out there to collect data. No. We're out there to golf and enjoy that time. And so the way we think about building what we're building is it should integrate into that experience. If there are moments where it can enhance that experience, the golfing experience, and you feel like you can, like the app's going to be there for you to interact with it. And in moments where you don't want to interact with it, it's always going to be silent. So the tracking's happening automatically. And whenever you need information to make smarter decisions, the app's there for you to utilize.
Right. Sal, will you give us a quick background about you and how did you get from point A? Now you have a PhD in mathematics, yeah?
No, I don't have a PhD, but I do have an undergrad in mathematics
That's,
and computer science. And then I started I started golfing when I was like 13 or 12. And I just have like a deep, I would say, passion for the game.
yeah.
But what point A to point B are we talking about?
Well, how do you come up with the idea for this company, and what was the
So my background actually has been in startups. So ever since college, I uh, basically have worked in startups, and I love the creative process of taking a problem that maybe hasn't been solved by anybody or at scale hasn't been solved, and making just creating awesome products that people are going to love. I think that it's important for me to be doing things that I'm passionate about so that every morning I wake up, I'm ready to go to work. And so after business school, actually during and after business school, I started this with a couple other co-founders. And it really spoke, I mean, in the sense, I was a data architect before starting Arccos. So
okay? There we go.
I could see data is impacting every aspect. I mean, this is like 6 years ago. Like data is impacting even then. I mean, more so now. Every industry, like when you think about what Google is, it's using data to serve better ads. It's just data-driven advertising, and because you put in a certain search term, they know exactly what you're thinking about and can serve ads, and that's I don't know, $700 billion company. So data is transforming advertising. But it also, I mean, the reason it's working is it's better matching the needs and the supply and demand. And similarly, when you look at Uber, that's using data to better match like drivers and passengers. So I was like, in golf, when you think about golf, it's a very data centric sport. In the end, you end up making decisions. It's like literally like an Excel spreadsheet. When you show up, like they give you the scorecard. It's like all numbers on it.
Yeah.
Like what other sport does that? And then you're putting more numbers in and all that stuff. So why isn't anybody analyzing and doing golf data stuff? And that's where we started. And we realized, on course data is something that's really not been touched. I think like when you look at simulators and launch monitors, a lot of technology and investment in the golf industry has gone into figuring out like shaft,
Yeah.
flex points, and all that. Like amazing. I mean, that's also helped golfers a ton. But nobody's actually like in the end, all of that stuff. Like when you teach somebody, when you fit somebody, it has to translate to are your scores getting better or not on the course when you're performing, and nobody's tracking that. And what aspects of your game are struggling? What are they? So nobody's touching that. So we kind of started focusing in on that.
Yeah, that's right. One of the biggest pieces of for me that I love about Arccos is, well, I can, for instance, play and say, well, my driving's not bad, but it's my pitching that's holding me back, or my approach shots. And then I go back and look at the data, and I could be completely wrong. My driving could be totally acceptable, and what's holding me back is actually shots from 70 to 85 yards. Well, because I botched 3 of them or something. So I think this perception when we're playing that we know how we're doing, I think is misleading sometimes, and
Totally.
and it's hard to remember too as a player, and it's hard to really synthesize. I think objectively the whole round, and then analyze, well, what do I need to work on? What are my missing pieces?
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's like, I mean, when you think about it, like, okay, let's say you're shooting 70 to 100, anywhere in that, like you're hitting 70 on the really good golfer end, to 120 to 130 shots on maybe the beginner spectrum. That's a lot of shots over 4 hours to remember, to understand what you did. And by the way, when you do something, you don't know how you, like, was that good or was that truly bad? Like, I mean, let's say if you hit an approach shot to 40 feet from 150 yards, is that a good shot? Is that a bad shot? It depends upon the skill level, but I think I should look up the PGA Tour data. I'll pull it up right now, but I feel like they probably average from 150 in the fairway. My guess is like 35 feet. So you might not feel good about 40 feet, but reality is it actually might be really good for your skill level. And that's not the thing to worry about. And it was the drive that on that short hole that messed you up. So you had 150 from the fairway to go.
That's right.
So not only is it impossible to remember, like as golfers, we don't have the benchmarking ability because we don't see like a 10,000 other scratch golfers or 5 handicap golfers or whatever we're trying to play. So we don't know how to compare ourselves against that. And so what part of your game do you really need to work on? Where are you losing those strokes? That's so important to know.
That's exactly right. It's easy for me as a coach to say on the outside, you need to work on your weaknesses, not on your strengths. I mean, strengths are, if they're okay, you got to find those weaknesses. At the same time, you know, you need to know where they are and how to find them. So it's easy for me on the outside to say that. I think when it's the player themselves, it's a little bit harder to piece and pick through that. So let's go. You just said something which made me want to get into the strokes gained feature, because this is really, really cool. So before we dive into strokes gained, will you just give your easy explanation of what strokes gained is?
Yeah. So basically, I would say like the simple way to think about it is strokes gained is a way to truly understand your strengths and weaknesses in terms of benchmarking to a certain level. So let's say you're a 5 handicap and you want to get to a 0, or you're 10 handicap, you want to get to a 5. Where do those 5 shots come from based on where your game stands today? Maybe 2.5 come from driving. Maybe so strokes gained gets you that answer, which traditional stats don't. So traditional stats like tracking how many fairways you hit, how many greens in regulation you hit, they're flawed statistics, because like if you're tracking how many fairways you hit as a measure of how well you're driving, 2 people, one that drives 300 yards on average, the other one who drives 200 yards on average, and hit the same number of fairways will come out as like, okay, they're both really good drivers of the golf ball, but that's not true at all. The person who's driving at 300 yards has a huge advantage. And then similarly on approach shots, like let's say you're a bad driver, and as a result, you end up putting yourself in the rough more often or whatever it is, or far back, you're going to hit less greens. So it's not your approach game. Your approach game might be really good, but you're not hitting a lot of greens, so it could give you the wrong answer. And the way strokes gained works, and specifically Arccos strokes gained, I'll talk about that. We've taken 200 million shots in our system that our users have taken and created a benchmark. So we call it the strokes to get down model. So for any course, anywhere in the world, we know from this point on, let's say there's a 400 yard, and from the tee box, what the average number of shots a certain handicap golfer is going to take to get down. So from 399, I think the average scratch, let's say, takes 4.0 shots. An average 5 handicap might take 4.2 shots. An average 10 handicap might take 4.4 or 4.5, whatever those numbers are. And then what we do is whatever your starting point is, the strokes to get down for the tee box. Then when you hit that drive, what's the strokes to get down from there? We do the math. We subtract one from the other, minus the one shot you took, to get the number of how many strokes did you gain or lose. It's in fractions. So it could be like you just gained 0.1 shot on this drive because you hit it really well down the middle of the fairway, or you could have lost because you hit it in the rough and didn't hit it well. And then so there's the strokes to get down model, then inform strokes gained, which for each shot we tag whether you're gaining or losing strokes versus what you want to be, and then we tally that up for the entire round and give you all kinds of views into it.
Right.
It's complicated in terms of explaining how it works, but it's very simple in understanding what it communicates, which is what are your weaknesses? What do you need to work on, and how bad are those weaknesses?
That's right. And I think you said something very, very correct. And that was the traditional stats, like how many greens did you hit? How many fairways did you hit? How many putts did you have? They're limited and sometimes misleading.
Mm-hmm.
So
absolutely.
This is a much more, more sophisticated mechanism to really understand how you're doing. Now, what about if somebody's a 20 handicap versus a 5 handicap? Are your strokes gained adjusted for that?
Totally. So one of the unique things we were doing is, which is something that's not been available to golf in general, is we're now benchmarking against 40 different skill levels, all the way from a 30 handicap to a plus 10, the mythical golfer that, I mean, I don't think Tiger was a plus 10 when he won his Tiger Slam. So you as say a 20, let's say you want to get to a 15, you can benchmark yourself against the 15 handicap, and it will show you where those 5 shots should come from. Like, I think it's really important, that piece, because if you're always like benchmarking against a scratch golfer and you're a 20 handicap, those 20, it can be demoralizing. And plus, it could lead you to like, I got to work on everything.
Right.
So you want to break the problem down in chunks. Like, okay, let's first get to 15 before we get to a scratch. And so we do that. I think that's really important. And one other thing, like I'd say, like it's funny, you also talk about traditional stats, and I can't tell you how many times like I hear conversations like, I take 32 putts around. If I could just work on my putting and take 29 putts instead, I could be like I could drop from a 15 to a 12 right away, or whatever it is, or from a scratch to a +3. Right. But the reality is it might not be putting that's holding you back, because you might be taking 32 putts because you're putting from 40 feet all the time, or 50 feet, and PGA Tour pros from 50 feet, 3-putt 18% of time. So,
right. Or you may not, exactly. You may be hitting every single green, exactly, or not hitting any single green.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you could use the strokes gained any kind of in any area of your. You could use it in putting, you could use it in driving, you could use it in long game. And this is what the PGA Tour have been using for quite a number of years at this point. So now it's finally accessible to everybody else.
That's right. And it is like I would say, the only way to look at your golf game, to really understand what you're doing. That's really the only way. Because and that's why the tour pros do it. They're not looking, I mean, we've all gotten smarter in all these sports, like the movement with Moneyball in baseball led to everybody realizing, like we're capturing all this data, but we're not analyzing it correctly. Yeah. And so golf's, I would say, big moment was with strokes gained, which, I mean, there were pioneers. People have been thinking and talking about this for a long time, including Peter Sanders and Mark Brody. And I think there were a couple of guys from MIT as well. But now it's finally becoming mainstream, where like even on TV, they talk about, okay, he's gaining strokes from this distance, so that's he's really good there. But these are his weaknesses from this distance. He's losing strokes. Right. And so golf's moment is here.
Will you tell this story? You told me this recently of how strokes gained helped you. It was on the par threes.
Oh yeah, that was really, really. I mean, strokes gained has helped me in so many different ways, but this one was recent. So we're building some really cool, interesting. Sorry, I keep moving and shaking, but so we are building, as you know, like, and I think we've shared some of this stuff with our users, but we're building out like a more robust strokes gain analytics platform, which uses AI, does all these benchmarking, slices and dices data like nobody's ever seen before. And one of the things we are doing, and I'm fortunate since I'm part of the team that's building it, I get early access to my data and insights. And so I found my approach game was really good. I was gaining strokes. My target this year is to be a scratch golfer. I'm about a 2 right now. And so I was losing. So I was gaining 1.2 shots around on my approach game. Mm-hmm. The 2 issues I had, one was driving distance, which I'm working on. I was actually pretty accurate with the driver, but not hitting it long enough. And then the second one was, so that was the biggest thing. But on the surface, it looked like I'm a really good approach player because I'm gaining strokes. But then we break that down into many different ways. So you can find like hidden nuggets where you can really accelerate your improvement. And so for me, what I found was when we break it down by terrain, so tee shots, which are approach shots, which are tee shots, par 3 shots, then rough, fairway, and sand. From the tee shots, I was losing 1.5 shot around. From everywhere else, I was gaining shots. And I was like, why the heck am I losing? Like, when I'm so good from the fairway, why am I so terrible on these 4 tee shots? And turns out I was teeing the ball up. And I mean, I spent a day thinking about, like, what am I doing different? Like, and then, I mean, I'm not smart enough to figure out immediately. It took me a day to figure out, I tee the ball up on par 3s, and I don't tee it up on fairways. Not that anybody knows. So, so I stopped teeing the ball up on par 3s, and I could immediately see it basically matching my fairway performance. So and then what's interesting, as I was talking to Ian Fraser from TSN, no, Tour Experience Golf, TXG. And he said, it's really funny. So I was talking to him like a couple of days ago, and he's like, we just did a video on how much of a difference, like when you put the tee in the ground on, like, so they were like tracking how like your delivery changes, like people just like started hitting up on it instead of hitting down. And I was like, really interesting. So they also said basically
they confirmed
it. Yeah, when the tour pros tee up or tee the ball, they tee it so you get a perfect lie. Essentially, it's like just sitting on the ground. That's how it works. But a lot of people tee it up when they shouldn't be. So
that's just one brick out of a whole wall of components of someone's game. So I mean, you're a 2. Can you imagine? Yes, you can imagine. That's why you built this thing. What this can do for a 10 handicap, a 12 handicap, a 15 handicap, a 20 handicap.
Yeah, totally. And sorry, go ahead.
Well, just the first time I used it, the very first time I used it, like the first few enough when I had enough data really to make a difference, I thought, wow, I am not even hitting my 5-iron. Why is that? So I could see so I started playing from different tees just to exercise some other clubs. And I also realized that my 5-iron I just hadn't really been practicing it. So I was favoring, that's so simple, but I never would have, it just made such a big impression on me to see it.
Interesting. Yeah, totally.
An empty data slot. I had no distance in it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like the thing with, even like so this is one recent story, the par 3 story. If somebody had come to me and said, you shouldn't tee the ball up on par 3s, I would have never changed. I'd be like, yeah, why would I not do that? I wouldn't have had the confidence to do it, and I wouldn't have had the data to show me. So now when data showed me, like, okay, I'm losing strokes, I need to change something here, I had the confidence to make that change, but also the motivation. And as our average user is a 16 handicap that gets to like a 12 in the first season. And we see improvement across the spectrum. Like obviously each golfer is different, and whatever your strengths and weaknesses are, that's what you work on. But I think there's also the psychological component of like the cognitive bias that you develop in terms of what you think your game is and what it really is, how far your clubs go and how far do they really go, what are your strengths and weaknesses are and what they really are. And that, like, just being able to overcome that is a big thing. It also leads to, I would say, motivation. When you see like, okay, this is what I got to work on, you get that much more motivated. But like, I'll give you an example of that. It was John K. Solheim, who's the president of Ping, and he was talking at the PGA show, and he's become an avid Arccos user, and and he shared this. I didn't know this, but he shared this story where he said, before he started using Arccos, he was literally, and he's access to the best equipment in the world, best fitting, best everything, and he's running like one of the top golf companies in the world, and he was stuck at an 8. He said between a 7 and 8 for like 15 years. And then he dropped down all the way to a scratch in 6 months, because what he realized was he's actually really good at driving and approach. And he knew he wasn't good at chipping. He didn't realize how bad he was. And he saw, like, basically he was like a scratch level player in driving and approach. At chipping, he was like a 25 handicap level player. So that motivated him to practice it, to take lessons. And in like 7-8 months, he goes from like literally a 7 or 8 handicap to a scratch golfer. And that's not a unique story, by the way. Like, that's the cool thing about it. We hear so many of these stories, and people write in and send us letters and videos, and it's like really energizing.
Very energizing. And even without, if someone hasn't had the benefit of using Arccos yet, I can testify that this has been so helpful as a coach to be able to say, oh, wait a sec. No, you don't need to work on your drives. This happened to me too. The guy, when I first started teaching, he convinced me that it was his drives. So this is almost 20 years ago, and I was pretty early as a teacher. So I was, okay, let's work on drives. So about 3 months into the summer, we went onto the golf course. Now I know I go on the golf course much faster. And now I also know that Arccos is like the answer to that. We get on the golf course, and he has the chipping yips. So I mean,
Yeah.
what is
So it
where
makes you, it doesn't let you do your job effectively either till you have that information.
that's my
Yeah.
whole point. That's why I love it. So will you get into, can you talk about the next feature with the Caddy link? Because that's
Yeah.
really, really cool.
Yeah, totally. So basically, today when you play with Arccos, you have to carry your phone in your pocket because we use the GPS in the pocket, and we also use ultrasound communication between the sensors and your phone to track every shot you're hitting automatically. Um, And so, as we look at, I would say, really scaling the business, one of the things is for, I would say, maybe 25% of the users, they don't want to carry their phone in their pocket.
Right.
And so, what we've done is built Arccos Link, which is like a little GPS clip. You clip it onto your belt buckle or your pocket. And I think it's actually even more important for women because the clothing doesn't allow for, I mean, so far golf clothing doesn't allow for not too many options to put your phone in your pocket.
Right.
And so this will expand, I would say, our access to a wider swath of golfers. It'll automatically be tracking, doing all the stuff that Arccos does on the phone. And
I'm
so
so
basically,
excited.
so I mean, it was like a really interesting engineering challenge because like we had to shrink everything down into like matchbox size that's in the phone. So and take the screen away. So we had to build all that technology, build it at quality and at scale, and so we're gonna be. I think like we sent out an email with the details, and we've made really good progress, and we're really in like the final line of production. So hopefully people will be getting that pretty soon.
I'm so excited about that. Will you also talk about, so last time I played with it, which a few days ago, I did a test where I did not take my phone out of my pocket the whole round.
Okay.
So I wanted to see how accurate the putting was. And I also didn't think about the way I wasn't doing anything terrible with my clubs because I know it's better if you have them, one club if you're going to have it face down. But I wasn't thinking about them. I wanted to see if I could play my round as I normally would, no mind share on.
Yeah.
And it was perfect.
Yeah.
I was pretty excited. I didn't have to change any putts. I didn't have to do anything. Now, what I am interested in is the whole location. See, what I didn't do is I didn't add the whole location.
Yeah.
So I know
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So what was I missing on that? And what?
Well, so actually, a couple of things. One, I would say in general, if you putt everything out, like play like a PGA Tour round, we'll probably track everything. But most people take gimmies, which is fine. We're not saying like don't. We're saying play as you would and carry the clubs as you would. We've built a lot of like technology over the past couple of years to really like hone in on all of that. So I think like the false positives are very, very, very little.
Yeah, it's working. It works.
Yeah, and the times I'll tell you like the times we'll miss a shot is if you hit it out of bounds, you take a penalty. We don't know that you hit it out of bounds, so you have to interact with the system. Take a gimme, you have to add the putts. If you take two shots, so let's say you hit a bunker shot, came back to your feet from the same location, we give you an automatic mulligan. So you have to add that shot. We can add that as a penalty. And then with Link, what we're doing from a flag location standpoint is we've put like a little button on top. So whenever you get to the flag, you can tap it. But also, let's say you forget to do that. It's very simple editing. Like I think like we actually track, and it takes about 3 minutes to true up your round after the round if you're not doing it in rounds. Half our users edit while they're playing. So when they're moving from one green to the next tee box, they'll make sure they add that gimme putt or mark their flag location. If you take two putts, the flag location is generally going to be pretty good. It's on one putts that we're using some heuristics to figure out, and then we also use crowdsourcing stuff. So somebody who's played that course before you that day, we get that location, and then in Link you can mark it. But generally, what we say is we'll get 98% of your shots recorded correctly. You spend 2-3 minutes editing at the end of the round. And then you get unbelievable insights about your game, and you're going to improve faster than you ever have. And you're going to have more fun doing it. And you're going to have better interactions with your instructor doing it. and you'll be able to track like what's working, what's not, all that stuff. It's just going to be a richer experience golf is.
Yes, completely. What do you think is the most helpful tool for people that's relatively new? I'd say the last 2 years that you've developed, or you can say last 3 years.
Disconnect. I was getting a Slack call. I mean, I can tell you.
Yeah.
So last 2 years, it's a good question. So before we launched it, I think it's probably the rangefinder, Caddy rangefinder, that is taking all the weather and elevation and slope and everything else into account to give you what the playing like number is.
Okay, can I tell everybody what does it if they haven't used it? So you hit your shot, you're walking. So I walked the other day and I didn't have my rangefinder with me. And in between shots, you can pull your phone at any point and the GPS is working and it'll tell you where you are at any point. You don't have to hit what am I? It's just showing you right there. So front, back, middle, and then there are 2 numbers. So, okay, so take it from there.
Yeah, perfect. So basically we give you what the GPS number is. So let's say you're 147 yards from the pin. Then we factor in what the wind's doing. We know exactly what direction the wind's coming off. Maybe it's coming at a 45-degree angle. So we understand based on our AI algorithms, like how much that wind is affecting the distance at the distance you're at. We know what the humidity is and what the impact of that is. We know, are you playing in Arizona, maybe in at a higher elevation, and you're generally playing at sea level, maybe on the East Coast, like, okay, ball's going to go a little bit farther. We factor that in. It's an uphill shot. We're going to factor that in. Is it gusty? We give you a range when it's gusting. So we say like, okay, with gusts, you got to play this basically on the lower end 150, on the higher end 158. So you know, like that's the 8-yard impact to gust up and down. That kind of information, I would say that's been really, really powerful. We've got holes in one that reported since that. I think the other thing which has been really interesting, which was like a little subtle feature we launched maybe like 1.5 years ago, was we show you how far you are from your previous shot. Yeah. So when you hit your drive and you're walking, it show you it's like 180 from the tee box, 185, 190, 195. Like it updates live, and that's been
really cool.
We get emails now. It's helpful to find your golf ball. Because once you realize, like, okay, I hit my drive 228, you're like, okay, this one wasn't hit well, so it's going to be shorter than 228.
Right.
And so when you're finding your ball, and especially now with like, there's no caddies and maybe there's less maintenance on the course and the rough stickers, so it might be a little bit harder to find your ball. So now, like, we get emails from our users, like how helpful it has been to finding your golf ball. So I'd say that one small one in the last 1.5 years, and then the rangefinder is a big one. And then we have 2 really, really big ones in Link and the advanced analytics via Arccos Strokes Gain coming up, which will be, I would say those will be game changing.
Really cool. Okay, I see a few things. One person asked, is this an app? Yes, it's an app, but it corresponds with Bluetooth sensors that you put on your club. So it's the whole package. It's not just your phone. You need the sensors as well. But the app is, I believe, the most powerful vehicle for accelerating you getting better. I mean, it just covers so many domains. Next question was, are any plans for a 3.0 version for grip sensors?
Sorry, what?
Are there any plans for a 3.0 version for grip sensors?
I think like from a sensor itself standpoint, we are not changing that right now. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to wait to buy that because of that. The sensors do a good enough job. Like they track your shots really well. The enhancements we're going to be making are in the app, in the software, and those are the updates you're going to keep getting as you become a subscriber.
I think that's probably what he meant. So not necessarily the grips themselves, but the app.
Yes. So app, absolutely. There are going to be major updates coming. I would say like our biggest update in 4 years is coming in the next month or 2 months.
And that's going to be the strokes gained.
Yeah, that's the biggest. Like I would say like that will be a game changing analytics. And we've given you some sneak previews in it, and it's really exciting. Like what I'm actually like just so excited about like when we launch that, the power it's going to give golfers, having shared it with you, with a few of our, I would say like we've shared it with a whole bunch of our internal beta users, um, as well. Like as we get feedback, we have a feedback group, and our partners, and the feedback has been so positive, and it really, we're just very excited, and we can't wait to share with our users.
I'm really excited too. And I think that a pretty obvious question that someone might have when they're playing is, well, like where do I look first? What does this mean? I have this information, but what does it mean? I think the strokes gain comes in there and gives some help. Oh, if you're losing 1.2 strokes, okay, why? And it's pretty cool that I don't know where the helpful tips
Yes.
that might come along.
So
I don't know if you're announcing that yet.
we're gonna be. I mean, so one, we're gonna have like when we launch any new features we launch, we have a proper onboarding process. But for strokes gained and all this stuff that we're gonna be doing, we're going to have onboarding. We already have like a website, Arccos Academy. If you just Google Arccos Academy, it'll take you there, and there are learning modules over there, so you can start understanding not only how to use the system, but also what the system's telling you. How can you utilize that information more effectively to accelerate your improvement, make smarter decisions, have more fun, have more holes in one, and great memories. Because like we play golf, and those memories are what I'd say keeps us coming back, but also gets us jazzed up about golf every time.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have any other suggestions for someone who's just starting out the process of using Arccos? Because it can, I won't say overwhelming, but there's a lot there. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think the number one thing is with any technology, you want to understand how it works and what it does. So like really invest, even if it's like 15 minutes, like reading up on Arccos Academy. Then I'll share a few tips. One, don't pair right before you're going to play. It'll take you like 5-10 minutes to do the pairing process, a one-time pairing process. So do it separately. Otherwise, you'll feel rushed about your game and all that stuff. Also, try, like I think like, so pairing is one. Second is if you are an iPhone user, we do a pretty good job conserving battery. But make sure your screen, like auto lock on the screen, is like 30 seconds. I think that's the minimum. Basically, they'll save a bunch of battery, because what ends up happening is people have like auto lock for 2 or 3 minutes. So when they pull out the phone, they're looking at GPS or whatever reason, and then they put it in their pocket. Then it stays on for 3 minutes, and like the screen is the biggest battery hog. Similar concept for Android as well. Like just make sure the screen is off when you put it in your pocket, and you can set the settings to that, and that's great. And I would say if you're hesitant in terms of playing with a phone in your pocket, try playing 3 or 4 holes. And anytime I've asked people to do that and convince them to try it, they've said, I didn't even realize there's a phone in my pocket. Like you realize it for the first couple of holes, but you're so used to carrying your phone with you everywhere in your pocket that you kind of forget about it, and the value and the data is immense. And then maybe the last thing I will say is you're out there to golf. You're not out there to collect data. So maybe don't obsess with the system. It's going to do what it's going to do. It's going to record all the stuff it can, which will be 98% correct. Don't let technology frustrate you. Use it knowing that the end goal is this data is going to help you get better. It's going to give you a real view into your game. So as you're playing, I'd say don't let it affect your performance, which means you're not out there to test Arccos. Arccos is collecting data. You're out there to play golf. So you'll just go play golf.
I wouldn't have come up with that stuff, Sal. That's good. That's really basic.
I've brought enough people into Arccos that I mean, it's a good question you asked me. Like I don't think I've been really asked that ever.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I think that it can be intimidating for people to start something new, and also some people are afraid of numbers, or they feel like, what am I going to do with all this? And so that's very wise.
Yeah, and that's also really a really good point. In fact, I think if you are thinking, I'm too inconsistent, I'm not good enough for this or for data, and I'll figure it out when my game gets more consistent, I'm working on my swing and I'm going to make it get better, then I'll get it. I would say if you're doing any of those things, you got to get it now. If you are somebody who's looking to improve, doesn't matter where your game is, what level you are, you need a system like Arccos to understand where your strengths and weaknesses lie. Are you actually getting better and worse in those aspects of your game? It's just so important. And it's not like the numbers are more helpful the higher your handicap. Her average 20 handicap improves 5 point some shots. Her average 5 handicap improves a shot and a half. So the improvement, I would say, is bigger the higher your handicap and the more consistent you are, because it'll start pointing out this is the most inconsistent club, or these are the most inconsistent parts of your game. That's information that's much more actionable than, oh, I suck and I'm inconsistent. Then how do you? Yeah.
I wonder if your data reflects this. My guess is yes, but just my experience is that even somebody in the higher handicap range, the 20s and even early 30s, have some consistent.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would say the notion that you're inconsistent is really an incorrect thing to say. It's just, what are you weak at?
Yeah.
That's just your weakness. And so what are your weaknesses? And those weaknesses are going to stay your weaknesses. And people confuse that with inconsistency. Golf, everybody's inconsistent. We're not making perfect content. It's contact or whatever it is all the time. Even Tiger isn't. It's, what are your inconsistent areas, which is another way to say, what are your weaknesses?
Yeah, that's
and
right.
You don't know that, and we pinpoint that.
That's exactly right. I was watching the Seminole tournament. Was it
last
night? And Dustin Johnson, it was on the back nine. He hits a drive, and he said, "Finally, I hit the center of the face."
Yeah, that's true.
It just caught my attention because, I'm sure these players are saying that, but they're never mic'd up when they're, on tour. Now they were all mic'd up, so you could hear it all. And I think that was really helpful. It was so relatable, I thought, to now I'm digressing from our conversation, but see them walking.
Oh, you're so right. Yeah.
Carrying their own bags and actually.
I loved it that they were carrying their own bags, because we are all carrying our own bags too.
Loved it.
I actually enjoy carrying my bag.
Same.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
And what was funny was, it was the relatable piece. I mean, the whole coverage was very relatable, because on 17, it was windy, and they were flummoxed. Like the one guy's hitting a 9, one guy's like, what is it playing? Is it playing plus 10? Which is, by the way, they probably should have had Arccos Caddy, would have solved it for them. Because I immediately started my app because I wanted to see what the impact, and is it gusty? So it wasn't gusty. When it's not gusty, it's actually very easy for us to solve that problem.
Wait a second. You started your app to see what it was like
on hole 17. I wanted to see what the impact of all the conditions was. So the pin was, I think, if I remember correctly, 156 when they were playing, and then it ended up being 120 in the playoff kind of thing. But it was playing plus 9, so that's what they needed to play.
Wow. And that's why that's why they all ended up short.
Yeah. So, and they were just kind of guessing, and which is what they said. We're just guessing.
Right.
And I was like, yep, you are actually guessing. It's true.
You're actually guessing. But it was fun to also see them take out their rangefinders. But you're right. If they had Arccos Caddy, they could have had a little better information.
I didn't think of that. In fact, I mean, it's funny. We have as a company, we have strong relations with the people at Seminole. Bob Ford is the chair of our advisory board.
Great.
And Jimmy Dunn's one of our investors. Jimmy Dunn's the president of Seminole. I've been fortunate to play there with both of them.
Nice.
And it's a great golf course. But it's actually what's really fascinating is when you play a place like Seminole, so if your short game's your weakness, it's really going to amplify and really show you in the data. So I was playing with another person who's an Arccos user, and their weakness was their short game, and it really tests your approach and short game a lot more than your driving game. And so my weakness generally has been driving, and so I actually tend to do quite well at Seminole versus people who might have, from a scoring perspective, because the greens are, as the Donald Ross design, the greens are mounted, so you miss a little bit. on your approaches, you're penalized a lot more. You miss a little bit on your drives, you still get a chance to come back.
Yes.
And so it's like even the course architecture plays into like a better understanding of your strengths and weaknesses. And maybe you can bet more on courses where you think it's going to play to your strengths.
Wouldn't that be a crazy feature for Arccos too, for like 10 years down the road? Oh, you're going to play Marion. Okay, so let me tell you, Marion's on 280 acres and it's going to be high rough. Based on yours.
Totally. Yeah, if you're, and your biggest problem is approaches out of the rough.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. Right. I would say that's the direction that we're headed in. That's the direction the world of data and golf is headed in.
Yeah.
And we're going to have insights like never before, but at the same time, it's all going to be very simple though. Like the key is we're going to simplify, like Steve Jobs said, the ultimate sophistication is simplification. And I would say we always think about that when we're building stuff. While the technology is like, even behind the iPhone, like it's really complicated technology. How the hell does it happen when I touch the screen? It knows exactly what, and I can swipe and I can pinch and zoom. And I was like, they launched that for 13 years. And no, we don't know how it works, but we know what it does. Similarly, like at Arccos, our view is like the data science behind all the stuff we're doing. You don't need to know anything about it. All you need to know is, are we answering the questions accurately? And are we answering the questions you want answered, which are, how do I get better? What do I need to do today? Or is this the right equipment for me? All those things, we got to deliver simple answers, and that's what we'll always do.
Right. So it'd be helpful too if club fitters were really comfortable looking at the data too, and looking at.
Yeah, we've, I mean, I think like when you think about like from a vision of Arccos standpoint, we see us as impacting not just like golfers, like, so like your, as a golfer, your relationship with your game, your understanding of your game, we view ourselves as bringing data to the entire golf industry so everybody can be smarter. So not just instructors, but fitters, club manufacturers. And from a fitting standpoint, today, I think the fitting process is incomplete because when you go in, they do stuff to you on a launch monitor, and then you go out and play. And now, did it help? Did it not? There's no way for you to know. Like, you're just hitting shots. How can you know that? You get a sense, and maybe you convince yourself. You just spent $500 that, you know, this actually did help me.
Right.
But it might not always be true. And my guess is, it's probably not true more often than fitters would like, than players would like. And so now with Arccos, you're going to be able to track that, and fitting becomes more of a relationship than a transaction, similar to coaching as well. And so that's why we partnered with Club Champion. That's like one of the largest, I think the largest actually fitter in America. So now they put their people in Arccos so that there's a check-in after a month. Like, are the clubs performing to the extent that the fitter expected it to based on the fitting? And, you know, I mean, I'm talking a lot, but I'll share one more Ping story.
You know. No, I'm enjoying it. Please.
So, we have a partnership with Ping, and I was playing with, so I didn't really know much about fitting, honestly, except, you know, like I'd gotten fit once for my driver, and it didn't, it helped, but I wasn't sure. But then I looked at my data and it did. But I was playing with John K. Solheim, and I was showing him Arccos, and the second time we played, I was like, what have you learned about your data in it? And he was like, you know, I saw like I was missing more left than right, which was really interesting. And I was like, oh yeah, so just aim a little bit more right. And easy solution, right? And I was like, yeah, it solved the problem for you. He's like, Sal, you know, I don't need to do that. I can like get my clubs refit so that they're like pointed a little more right. I don't have to change my stance and alignment. Yeah, I can do that. And I was like, wow, you can do that? And so I learned, like, you know, but what was also interesting was, here's a guy who has access to like the latest, greatest fitting stuff money can buy. And his fitting data suggested something other than what his on-course data suggested. And so there's like, I would say there's going to be really, really interesting implications of fitting, because the other problem fitting is when you, today.
Well, give me an example of what that might have been. I'm trying to think.
So he basically got his he got his lies adjusted based on course data, because he was saying I'm missing twice more often to the left than the right.
Okay, so it was a directional thing. So it was a
yeah directional. Then there probably is like loft stuff too based on gapping, club gapping. Right now there's like whatever, like everybody's got the same, essentially the same gaps, but maybe you're gonna have like different gapping in your loft. I don't know, but I'm sorry, I lost my chain of thought. What were we talking?
We're talking to John Solheim and what he used.
Yeah, and then one other piece was like when from this data they realized, you know, when they fit like you for your wedges, especially like the short shots, 40 like the vast majority shots are from the rough for chips, and from 40 yards for a 15 handicap. So now when you go into ping, they're actually fitting you for those shots because you're going to hit a lot of those. You're not hitting anything from tight lies, not a lot of them, and that's not the thing that they need to optimize. So it's really fascinating, the application of this on-course data to fitting.
That was going to be my question, especially since there was a relationship with Ping already. How has their company changed? What adjustments have they made based on their access to this data, and how they know that you
I mean, I won't speak on their behalf. I'll only share the stories that they've shared publicly, but I do know they're a very data-centric group of people. I mean, they're the ones that launched fitting, like the whole concept of fitting, customizing clubs per player. They pioneered it, whatever, 40 plus 50 years ago.
There you go.
So that's all. So you can see that in their DNA. I will also say, like, we've been working with Cobra as well.
Yeah.
You see the same thing in engineers over there. The engineers, when you look at the R&D departments, have been blind in terms of what, like, they can test on robots, they can test in hitting bays, but they can't really get data on course, like how are people actually performing. And actually, maybe that's what I forgot. The thing I was going to say was the other problem with fitting without on-course data is you never hit 20 drives in a row on the golf course. You hit a drive, then you walk, then you hit a shot or take a card. The next drive is another 10, 15 minutes away. And so you can get into a groove when you're hitting the same shot, but that might not be reflective of your tendencies actually out on the course. And that, like, the other sports certainly are changing that, where you look at, like, I was talking to Daryl Morey a couple of years back, who's the GM for the Houston Rockets. He's the Moneyball for basketball. And he said that, like, on the free throws, they basically went from, like, they take, like, practice like 20 in a row, but now they're going to do 2, then they're going to practice more, then they're quickly going to get to the line, take 2, just like real game environments. Because like, there were a bunch of free throw shooters be really good at practice and really terrible in play, and now they're replicating real game environments. And so similarly, I think, like, fitting, the more it represents what you do on the course, the better you're going to get fit.
Funny you should say that. So yeah, I've got a degree in motor learning. There's so much research, and there's a study exactly done on free throws in basketball, and this was in, I think this was in the 80s that the study was done, and clearly, and they weren't even the first to design this particular study. It's been done so, like, for 100 years at this point. This contextual interference concept has been looked into, and by changing up the movement, you're forced to actually restructure the plan in your head and then create it. And so it's a deeper way of learning to actually have to start from scratch rather than just do what you just did and repeat. Hit shots.
Yeah. That's interesting. Like, I mean, I didn't know you had that degree, but that's fascinating to hear.
Yeah. So it's this is yet another reason. I want people to get on a golf course and see what they're doing, as opposed to sit on a driving range and hit shots, because that doesn't help you play better.
Point. Yeah, great point. I mean, I think, like, what you could, to me, driving ranges serve the purpose of working on stuff, but it shouldn't be that you take stuff from basically the driving range should be informed by what's happening on the course and not the other way around.
Yes, a great way of saying it. And as a coach and an instructor, I spend a lot of time working on technique with people. Yes, technique makes a difference, but to a certain extent, you can't just park yourself on the range and just work on technique, particularly if it starts to become easy, right? If you really need some work to make some adjustments and balls are going everywhere and you're very much in your head, the driving range is an okay place to be. But if you're really trying to prepare yourself for performance, you got to get moving. You got to get on the course and carry your own bag. I'm just kidding. If you can't carry, that's okay. I still like you. Oh, gosh. It's so good. Oh, this is so great, Sal. So okay, here's a question. Any partnership with launch monitor technology in the pipeline? I don't see why you would need any partnership with a launch monitor, but I'll let you answer that.
No partnerships yet. I think like the reason they're probably asking is they want to correlate the data on course to launch monitor data, see what it might imply. I think like we might do something in the future. And it's an interesting question, but at this point, not really, but maybe in the future.
Right. You've got such cool stuff coming up for your on-course thing. I'm so excited.
Thank you.
Yay. Will current sensors adapt to Arccos technology improvements?
What's the question?
Will current sensors adapt to Arccos technology improvements?
Yes.
Cool. Very cool. So if you've bought it already, you're in good shape.
The new stuff that we're building out.
Wonderful. Good, Sal. We're going to get cut off because I know Instagram cuts us off. But thank you so much for your time and your contributions to helping all of us get better.
Yeah, thank you, Trillium.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Same.
All right. Thank you. Take care.